Good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Seven, live from Jerusalem with Rabbi Aaron Dovid Poston, who I appreciate so much sharing this wonderful series with us, The 48 Ways to Wisdom. And today we got a doozy for you, part 36. I do encourage everybody to make sure that they go over these lessons closely. Last week was a wonderful one on Tochachot, about loving rebuke. Very, very difficult one, but we all need to integrate it and acquire it if we want to acquire wisdom. So we can't go wrong. So let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Rabbi Poston, we see you're enjoying your coffee. Always a joy to be with you, and thank you so much for staying up late to share with the No Hide World Center and the world this wonderful series.
Shalom, Dan. Shalom, everybody. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here with you guys. Today is another difficult topic to cover. We'll get to it right away if you want. It's number 36 in the 48 Ways to Wisdom, the 49 different character traits that the Israelites proceeded in to integrate. That's a great word. In order to receive the Torah, in order to receive wisdom. And these are pearls of wisdom that are handed down from the rabbis all the way from Mount Sinai down to this present day.
Beautiful.
As you know, over my left shoulder, Rav Noach Weinberg put together a great seminar based on the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, chapter 6, Mishnah 6, the 48 Ways to Wisdom. And number 36 is to mitrachek, to distance yourself, min, from hakavod. Kavod means honor. Now, literally, like if you take the word kavod, what is honor? Honor is heavy, is weightiness, is presence. So you walk into a room and you want everyone to notice you. That is what one should distance themselves from. The real, true honor is from within. And one has to be able to recognize that and build their own, proper hashkafa, proper worldview of what honor is. And we're talking about in a real sense and not in a fake or counterfeit way of, well, that's what we're going to discuss, okay? So one should distance themselves from, let's say, the fake honor and hopefully truly be able to build up what we're going to talk about tonight is a healthy, honorable way to seek, let's say, presence or reality. Okay? So the first thing we have to recognize is that we all seek it. Okay? We all seek it. We have a body and we have a soul. The soul is interested in real, true reality. Okay? Let me just go to my one note because I have a specific point about that. That it seeks meaning. In other words, what we truly want in this world is meaning, but that's only on a soul level. The body is okay with counterfeit pleasures. It seeks the illusion. We'll call it temporary. In other words, when it comes to the soul and we talk about reality, we're talking about eternal reality. And it really does seek to do the right thing and have some meaning in life. Whereas the body is more interested in, let's say, what do they call it? There's a term for it, like instant gratification, right? Pleasures, physical pleasures, and would even be satisfied with illusion. Let's just say, just for the moment, right? So keeping that in mind, we do have to recognize that we all seek it, we want it. We'll call it recognition or honor. Everyone wants to be admired. Everyone wants to be respected. Okay, so what do? So unfortunately, we seek it in many things that are even contradictory to each other, right? Some are looking, let's say, using their good looks to seek attention. Some are using their intelligence to seek attention. Some are using their wealth. Some are using power, right? Some people want to say how idealistic they are, right? Some others want to use how pious they are. Okay, so there's things that are, let's say, on the extremes, but we're all, Baruch Hashem, we're all different, and we seek it in different ways. So basically, one of the most common denominator behind all of them is it's a phony sense of self-esteem. And what it actually ends up happening is we feel empty, right? We actually feel empty. Let's say you go to a party and you're like, I don't know, you either feel you're the talk of the town, or you want to present yourself as something you're not. Okay, so you maybe do some exaggeration, but you're talking about yourself for 3 hours. So you're the life of the party. What happens when you leave? You feel so empty. You feel so
crash.
I mean,
like a sugar high.
Yeah, I mean, it does take a little bit of effort, maybe a lot of effort for some people, just to be a little bit more objective and realize it's not about you. You know, the same questions they're asking you, what do you do for a living? Okay, you can ask them too, right? How's your family? Are you the oldest? Do you have, about your siblings? Where did you grow up? Okay, so number one, I mean, it has to be real. You have to be truly interested, right? But how does one distance themselves from honor? So one of the main ideas is not to look for respect from others, but to find the self-respect, find the true respect that you should have within yourself, right? Because the Rosh Yeshiva mentions like fool's gold. I don't know exactly what fool's gold is, but it ain't worth a whole hell of a lot of anything.
Iron pyrite, yeah.
Okay, I mean, it could, a little bit of wind can just blow it away, right? So what we have to do is we have to work on attaining what we call genuine self-respect. And that's only going to come through being good, not through looking good, right? I remember there was I think it was a comedian. I don't remember who it was. Maybe someone can remind us. I think they asked them.
Rodney Dangerfield, no respect at all.
Oh, that's true. That's one. That's an interesting one. I was thinking like, oh, you look good. Well, it's not a matter of how you look, but it's not about how you feel. It's about how you look, right? Obviously, you have to feel good, but some people look. If you don't feel good, at least look good, right? So unfortunately, that is a big problem for us in this world. So one of the key ideas here is to determine what you think is truly meaningful in life and then strive to attain it, right? There are many who are satisfied with themselves because they know who they are. They know they're doing important things, and they don't need public recognition to reassure themselves of their worth. And as I mentioned in the very beginning, there's a classic body-soul conflict. Okay, so we talked about the body is interested in illusions and a quick fix or the moment, whereas the soul is looking for what's truly important. Okay, so that's something we all just have to recognize and not try to, sweep it under the rug and think this doesn't apply to us. And the idea about seeking approval, right? Chasing honor drives people to do some ridiculous things. So let's say, today we have real classic examples of a profile on a social media, right? I haven't really seen too much TikTok stuff, but I hear there's a lot of issues. I think it even went to the Senate. It's causing some real delusions. Real psychological problems with the young people today, whether it's body shaming or bullying. There's a lot of competition out there, and it's creating a lot of. Listen, I really don't know that much about it. Maybe people could fill us in, but apparently it did go to Congress, and it was a big deal. I think there was even like a whistleblower that discussed some of it. I don't know whatever would come out of that. But it's a real problem. So let's say people would put onto, let's say I'm not just talking about TikTok, but anything, profiles. I think I even saw an advertisement that said, I'm not sure if it's Instagram or some of these other things, they're all, a lot of them are photoshopped, things that you try to make the best impression. Obviously, listen, you go for a job interview, we all know that first impressions are everything. So obviously, when it comes to being asked, because that's what you do in a job interview, they're going to ask you what you do. You should. There's no question about it. What's the word? List your accomplishments with pride, right? But the fact is that you got the interview. That's already saying a lot, because whatever you wrote in the CV or whatever it is that you handed in order to get the job based on your qualifications. So of course you're going to be honest right? You don't need to, I guess the word is exaggerate or blow things out of proportion or talk about it.
Oh, it'll haunt you. It could haunt you.
So he writes that young people today present carefully crafted pages on social media websites to promote a certain image of their life, even though it has no bearing on reality. They're literally creating fake persona in order to oppress others. So I think many of us can relate to that, right? Knowing that it's out there. Now, even if we don't resort to these, delusions, let's say, right? But we all fall at times into a trap of jockeying for recognition. We boast about our successes, seeking approval and accolades to feel validated and important. So he mentions the next time you have a conversation, see how long it takes for the other person, or even judge yourself, to start mentioning personal accomplishments. Now, obviously, what's wrong with being eager to impress people? Again, if it's a job interview, I think you have to, right? But basically, it's a sign that you're not sufficient, you don't sufficiently respect yourself, and you're trying to either compensate, or we'll call it overcompensation, with an artificial boost from others, and this isn't real. So the idea of relying on the approval of others only makes you more, I'll call it hollow and insecure, because deep down you feel you are a fraud. Now the Talmud in Eruvin 13b, we did discuss this idea once before. I don't remember which one of the 48 ways, but anyone who seeks greatness, greatness flees from him.
Right.
And conversely, anyone who flees from greatness, greatness seeks him. So there was a very beautiful teaching over there. That was by Hillel, by the way. And Hillel is the one, I mean, he was very humble, but he made sure that in any discussion, I mean, basically an argument, but it doesn't matter, let's say discussion, he would always go out of his way to try to present the other side or understand the other side. Because remember, if the other side was right, there's no point in arguing. But if you do have a disagreement, at least you have to make sure you understand the other side first. And so we call that humility. I mean, there was a certain act of humility. So basically, you see him starting off talking about the other side. So that's a good trait. And of course, that brought him to a certain amount of wisdom. And for those that know in Talmudic literature and in halacha, we would determine most halacha, if not like kamat, almost everything goes like Hillel as opposed to Shammai. So since we're talking about acquiring wisdom, this act of humility, I mean, really pulling yourself out of the picture. I mean, even I gave a class on Thursday nights, Abraham, why did God choose him, right? God appeared to him. It says Elav. It doesn't say to Avraham. And one of the important lessons that Kli Yakar explains is because the word Avraham, which is his name, symbolizes certain greatness. He was the Av Hamon Goyim. He was the father of many nations, as we conceive until today, 2/3 of the planet, maybe even really 100%, because you talk about even Buddhists and Hindus have roots in the 6 children of Abraham that he sent to the east with gifts. All right, that's not really for now, but basically the idea was God appeared Alav. To him, his name isn't mentioned, because who is his essence? His essence was Anochi Ofer Ve'efar. He says, I am but just dust and ashes. He wasn't out there, with a big sign, neon sign. He was sitting by his tent and saying, why don't you come on in? I'll wash your feet. I'll give you a little bit of bread, right? He spoke minimally and offered the minimum amount. But obviously, even though he offered the minimum amount, he provided with the maximum service to other people. So that's, it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not Jewish, right? He is the father of many nations. And so he is a great role model for us. Beautiful. So we saw in Eruvin, he who flees from the honor itself flees from those who chase it, but it chases those who run away from it. Now, out of the trap. So you have to catch yourself when you're trying to impress others, which if you're totally honest with yourself, you will figure it out. Maybe not at the moment, but you could figure it out later and try to correct yourself later. We're all human. We're just flesh and blood. One of the examples he gives in some of his classes, imagine, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, but imagine someone who's of the opposite sex who is attractive. And they ask you on the street for directions. So and I'm using this as an example. I mean, it doesn't have to be that kind of an example, but maybe they're wealthy, or maybe that they have something that you need. Whatever it is that you look at your own reaction to how you assist that person to get back on the right path. If they're lost, they're asking for directions. So you could be like Mr. Tourist or Mrs. Tourist, Mrs. Tour Guide, right?
Tour guide,
You're going to talk to that person with such flair and upbeated, emotion.
Enthusiasm,
What reasons? Why? Because you're trying to prove yourself to them for some reason. So you as opposed to the person who's, let's say, less attractive, less wealthy, or right, a like it's almost as if they didn't exist, but this person exists, and you can see and test yourself. What are you doing to impress this person? Why are you doing it? What's motivating you? You want to feel more important. You want to prove that you're somebody, right? So you have to figure out how to drop the illusion, right? And actually attain real accomplishments in life, right? Real meaning in life. If you have that, you're not going to try to do these illusionary acts. When you're striving to live a life of integrity and to achieve what is truly important, you walk with strength. You walk like with your head up, and you know who you are, and with a lot of dignity. And your own life has weightiness and has meaning, and certainly a sense of purpose. And you don't need others to give you any self-esteem, because you already have it from within. There's another idea here. Chasing honor and recognition actually becomes pointless. Now, knowing this, we already mentioned this, that the honor runs after anyone who flees from it. Fine. The people who do not crave the ego boost are the ones who have genuine honor and self-esteem. They don't need people to tell them they're important, because they know they are important. So decide which goals you think are truly important and meaningful, and set out to accomplish them. Make a plan. Rise above the clatter and forget about seeking approval. Okay, now, this is a very interesting thing. And I don't want to bring in the New Testament as an example, but there is an example in the New Testament of what they call the Good Samaritan. Now, that itself, in what they call the New Testament, is actually a very anti-Semitic story. But people do use that term quite a lot. So I just want to speak about the idea. They have all these different research. Actually, let me just start with this idea that there was recently a rape on a Philadelphia train that I believe went through either 27 or 37 different stations until the person was caught, or apprehended, or stopped. But people were in this train, and they were caught on video with their smartphones just taking pictures. I mean, why couldn't someone call the police or 911 or whatever, the call for help, right? Or actually do something. I mean, I understand there could be, if there's one, if you're alone, maybe you feel that your own life could be threatened. But people have to stand up to do the right thing. So what happens, there's unfortunately an idea that if the more people that are passing by this unfortunate person, less people are likely to get involved. Actually, I think it happened in 1964. In 1964 in Queens, New York, there was unfortunately a story about someone who was murdered. I think they found out later there were 38 people that heard the screams or knew about what was going on. How they knew, whatever, I think through the screams. Maybe they actually opened the windows and saw it.
Oh, happen. Is that the incident that led to the development of the 911 system?
Well, this I don't know, but
I've heard this story before that, yeah, that because 38 people had let it, if they had a number they could call, and it was developed in New York, that 911 emergency contact system.
it makes sense what you're saying. I don't know if it's true, but I know that there was a whole
They should have did something though, right?
laws were passed that if you see something and you don't say something, you could be held responsible. Meaning, if you could have done something about it and you didn't do it. I do believe there were certain laws that tried to be enacted based on that.
I don't know if you are familiar with the Seinfeld television series that came out in the late 80s, early 90s.
I heard he was Jewish, so yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah,
Jerry.
the whole crew was virtually Jewish. The point being is when they ended their series, I mean, it was so popular, they could have kept going forever and ever, and they were getting bored with it. The point is, when they finished it, their last episode they were all convicted guilty of breaking something called the Good Samaritan law. Is how the last episode, the final episode, was, and they played all the drama. And people need to understand that drama is being involved in drama is it's nasty in our day and age. The way people act derogatory towards others, and that's something they should not do. But the whole end of that series showed how they had a camera and they witnessed a crime happening right in front of them, and they did nothing about it. And that's the point that I think you're bringing out. And they were then convicted of that, and that's how the series ended. And they brought all these witnesses from previous episodes to show some of the derogatory behavior that went on. And I think that because the show had Jewish roots in it, is they were really trying to get out some of the honest ethics that, hey, you shouldn't act this way.
A moral message. Well, especially since they're from New York, so they probably had more reason. I mean, I don't know if this happens in the smaller cities, but the larger the crowd, the less likely people are likely to do something about it.
Sadly.
So anyway, let's say you see somebody who needs help. Are you going to help them or not? So the moment you start boasting, let's say you did it, so you boast about it, this will remove some of the reward. I know it sounds like a crazy idea. We're talking metaphysically here. So two people can do the same act, let's say in different cities, and one boasts about what he did to help somebody, save somebody, and the other one saved the person as well, or did the kind act as well, but didn't boast about it. Somehow in heaven, right, there is a difference in the reward they will receive. So we're relating this idea that run away or distance yourself from this fake honor. Again, there are going to be times where you need to wake other people up to say, look, I did it, you could do it, right? It's even written about Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moses. We have the verse. Let me see where it is. I hope I brought the verse. Actually, I didn't bring the verse. Do I have it here? But it's based on the idea that a Jew was being beaten up in Egypt. Actually, I think it was in Exodus 2. Where is it? Yeah, I do have it. Exodus chapter 2, verse 12. So Moshe interrupts. He gets involved. He sees somebody being actually it was probably about to be murdered. So he was being beaten up, and he turned this way and that way, and he saw there was no man. So he struck the Egyptian and hit him in the sand. Now in Hebrew, vayithen ko v'ko, he turned this way and that way. For what purpose? To see if there was anybody around. And there was no one around, right? Ki ein ish. Now, does that mean there was no person? Or I mean, simple pshat, as we say, he must have been alone. But we find out later he wasn't, because there were other people that were there, and they actually turned him in to the authorities, right? So it must mean there was no man to step forward.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of metaphysical understanding. What does it mean that there was no man? That he didn't see out of this
Oh, yeah.
any
It can
descendants who were
reflect
going
an
to
entire generation.
or future converts. There's so many levels to every verse in the Torah, but the level I want to discuss is the idea that there was no man, at least simple pshat. Yet what did he do? He jumped forward to save the Jew. He struck the Egyptian. Okay, and this was something that it was a lot of self-sacrifice. I mean, he grew up in the palace. He had a pretty good living,
Cost
and
him,
yet
yeah.
at this point he was thrown out of the kingdom and lived in the desert for the next 60 years. It was not an easy decision, but it was the right thing to do. And the Torah tells us that, and we know that this is something that's just unbelievable. Thank God Moshe did that, and he really proved that he was to be the leader of the Jewish people. It's one of the things. Obviously, he did a lot of other things. There's another halacha in the Shulchan Aruch in Yoredea in 293:13. Now, this has come up a lot. People have asked me, to donate money. What if you're going to get a plaque on the wall? Do you give the money in order to get the plaque on the wall? Many synagogues, many non-profit organizations rely on donations, as we know, contributions, and they do. They put out the name of the person. It's like on the name of the hospital, right? A name of, you can walk into any Jewish hospital and you'll see a whole hallway full of plaques. So it depends what your motive is. Now, again, what many fundraisers will tell the potential donor is, that if you give, so many other people will give. And you can't fight that. It's true. If the Rockefellers get, I know they're not Jewish, but it doesn't matter. Whoever, if the Rothschild, whatever Jewish family would give, that people want to stick around with winners. People think, okay, they made a good, educated choice for this nonprofit, and they gave a significant amount of money. Other people who maybe are just as wealthy or less wealthy will also give. So the Shulchan Aruch actually says, so the lowest form of charity is to give grudgingly. Now that's the Rav Yosef Cairo. Rav Moshe Isserlis, the Ramah, adds, on the other hand, a man should not pride himself on the charity he gives. For if he does, he not only receives no reward, but there's actually a punishment in store for him. However, he may have his name inscribed on anything he donates. As a remembrance, in fact, it is the proper thing to do. So we're going to find a lot of ideas here that are going to be a little bit like, you have to find a balancing act. Like I mentioned, you go to a job interview, or you're running for an office, which I hope you don't, but if you have to, or some kind of public servant position, and you really believe you are the best person for the job, obviously there's going to be a time and a place to speak about your credentials, your whole list of accomplishments, but perhaps you do it begrudgingly, meaning out of necessity and necessity only. And you don't get this big, as you mentioned earlier on, some kind of great high out of just doing
Like we've seen false humility.
We'll go to, I want to go to Mishlei 16:5, but before that, I want you to find it. So in Gemara Brachot 5b, it actually discusses this idea about when you give korbanos, when you bring an offering to Hashem, or in this case, it's actually about how much Torah you learn or how little Torah you learn, as long as you do it for the sake of heaven. It doesn't matter the quantity. It matters the quality and your motivation. That's what it mentions in Gemara Brachos 5b. But, however, an action done with self-aggrandizement is not desirable to Hashem, but rather read to us Proverbs 16:5.
16:5 reads, everyone of haughty heart is an abomination to the Lord. Hand to hand he will not go unpunished.
So in Hebrew, it's To'avat Hashem Kol Gevalev. right? It's a toiva. It's despicable. It's an abomination. Anyone who is haughty of heart, arrogant of heart. So keep that in mind. So when you do a mitzvah, right? It doesn't matter you're Jewish or not Jewish. You do a mitzvah. The only ones who need to know about you doing it is God and God alone, right? When you do a kindness, we'll call it l'shem shemayim, for the sake of heaven. You do it sincerely and altruistically, not for the glory, not for any of your own glory, but because you know it's the right thing to do. Try your best, obviously, to do it anonymously, and you will get a great reward from the Almighty. And this is far greater than any plaque on the wall or admiration of your peers. In the same vein, he says, do not seek positions of leadership because you crave the limelight or you want to be the center of attention. This is becoming an egomaniac. When should you take the helm? Only when the situation calls for it, as we mentioned about Moshe Rabbeinu. So going to Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, verse 5, this is the same Hillel. He says at the very end, it's very interesting what he says all along, but I just want to get to the end. But anyway, he would say, a bore, that means ignoramus, cannot be truly God-fearing, and ignoramus cannot be pious. A bashful person cannot learn. People who are afraid to ask questions, you're so afraid what people are going to think of you, how are you ever going to learn? A short-tempered person cannot teach, nor does anyone who does much business grow wise, right? You have to know to minimize your business. That was one of the 48 ways. But here's the important statement. In a place where there are no men, strive to be a man, right? It doesn't matter, male, female. In other words, be an adult. Be the adult in the room, right? And that goes well with the example we gave of Moshe Rabbeinu. He looked around, there was no man, and therefore he took responsibility. If someone else is better at the job than you, and we're not talking about for a financial purpose, we're talking about most of these leadership positions are, I would say, even if it's a paid position, allow the person who's more qualified, who's more effective to do the job,
right?
And sit on the sidelines. Why not? Now, this is going to sound very controversial. I'm not going to mention the problem that we're facing in society today, okay? But basically social pressures. Social pressures, I will mention so we'll know what we're talking about here as an example. I mean, this is really across the board, social pressures. But imagine doctors who are not saying we're concerned about your health and therefore we want you to do something, but because we want to allow you a certain freedom to go wherever you want. And this is actually what doctors have been telling people I know. You should do this in order to get a passport of some sort, as opposed to, I'm really concerned about your health, and this is going to be good for you. So there's a lot of social pressure. So when we seek honor from others, we end up giving into social pressure, and we do things that we would not otherwise do in order to get people's approval, right? Why do people go to university? Just because everyone else is? What about a profession? Your parents give you pressure, your uncles, your aunts, you're maybe part of your society. You're not going to be very happy if you take up that profession and that was not your choice. This is something that, and this was written years ago, but this is a very important idea in the, let's say, the ultra-Orthodox world, and that is the use of a smartphone. Why get a smartphone? It's so dangerous. And yet, people get one because of the society pressure to get one. Don't get a smartphone because everyone else has one. That's not the reason. If you have a reason, perhaps, but make sure that you try everything.
Kind of like guns in the Old West, Rabbi. Picture, I don't know if you saw Westerns when you were young. Everybody in the 1800s had to have a gun, a sidearm in the Old West. And it was social pressure to have one. You had no choice. Sometimes it became a matter of survival. That's the way
Okay,
people look at cell phones today. I mean, for sure.
but it can become so addictive, and also if you don't have some kind of monitoring device, I think they call it a filter of some sort. It could take you down the deep end. But the main thing here about social pressure is don't become a robot. You have to choose your own path. We all know that social pressure is and can be extremely powerful. Now, there is an Ash Conformity Experiment. I want to spell it ASCH. People can look it up. And I'm sure once it comes up, there's going to be other things that will come up. Milgram Experiment, Bystander Effect. And we started talking about what happened in 1964 about this murder in Queens. But also this recent headline news about a rape on a Philadelphia train. It's just, there's a thing called groupthink, okay? And it's called basically dangerous conformity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you go into reading a lot of these or watching some of these research, I want to pull up here. I have something on the Milgram Experiment because, believe it or not, in Asha Torah, in the yeshiva, it was a big deal that when students came in, that they were, I would call it like decommissioned, like debriefed. You had to go through like unbrainwashing. We were so brainwashed in secular society and
Right.
in outside.
Baggage. Yeah.
And talking about peer pressure and the Milgram Experiment was a video. It's 5 minutes. Maybe it's not 5 minutes, but we saw a shortened version. What would you do? So basically, the Milgram Experiment. I want to tell you who the guy is. This what was his name? Stanley Milgram, Jewish guy, and this was after the Holocaust. He just couldn't figure out how is it that a whole society could, I shouldn't say the whole society, let's say a huge percentage of Germany could allow this to take place, right? The Holocaust. It's just, so people fall into what we call obedience, right? There's this obedience thing of the peer pressure in society. So he did this experiment, which today would probably be outlawed. Basically, they had a actor sitting in a separate room,
Yep.
and he asked you to turn up a volume of electric charge.
Shock. Yeah.
Shock. So it started at something normal. I say normal. What do I know? 15 volts all the way up to 450 volts, which is actually life-threatening. And so they would ask questions, and if the person got the question wrong, so they would put it up a notch. Again, I don't know exactly. It was maybe
And they told the person to shock them. Yeah.
And there was an actor, so the actor would scream or actually start off by saying "ouch," and as the power increased to like, remember it's an actor,
and pain.
actor.
Yeah.
So, and then we're talking about like if they would ask people like you and me before the experiment to predict how many people would you think would do this, go up to the highest point. So most likely we would bring it to like, I don't know, anywhere between 0 to 3%. And that was what was predicted. Maybe up to 3% would go to life-threatening things. But guess what happened?
It was much higher.
65% hit the 450 mark, which was actually life-threatening. And they even got to the point where there was no response, meaning the person said, I have a heart problem.
I did as I was told, yeah.
And I have a heart problem. And they even continued to shock the person. So unfortunately, this is a real problem. Are people are they using their internal compass for what is good? Or are they being persuaded, right? Influenced by peer pressure. Again, going back to you're the only one passing by a person who's in need of help, most likely you will help the person. But when you're around other people and they're also not helping, you're likely, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's increased with the more people, that you're likely not to do anything. And that's a real shame. So this idea of the Ash Conformity Experiments, a classic psychology study in which a group of people gave the obviously wrong answer to a question. So they basically had like 6 or 7 people in a room, and they were asking very simple questions about what they see. And you as an observer can see it's obviously what the right answer is. But out of these 5 or 6 people, 5 of them were paid actors. So the 6th person was the experiment. And when the other people said the wrong answer, which was obvious, he also chose, or she chose, the wrong answer because of the peer pressure. So what can I tell you? I mean, we're talking about staying away from honor. You got to do what's right. You got to stand up
because it's right.
Even
yeah,
when
you
it's
need to
not
know.
socially acceptable. And this really is what Avraham is all about, which is, this week's Parsha in the Torah talking about. So he mentions a shocking 75% of participants conformed to at least 1 in 12 tests. In the control group, with no pressure to conform, less than 1% of participants gave the wrong answer. And now he mentions, I think, one of his most famous statements: insanity is contagious. You really have to choose the group of people you're going to hang around with, unless you're a real fighter swimming up the stream against society. It has so much strength, and it can really, insanity is contagious, unless you have the inner strength to remain true to your convictions. Of course, we all know what happens in advertisement. He says, "Be aware. You should beware of the Marlboro Man." Now, this is going back. It looks so cool, right, to smoke and all this stuff. But I do have a little bit of
Advice?
a little take on it. No, a little take. Listen, nobody should really start smoking. But I found out, they said, "Oh, people smoke to be cool." And you know what? Maybe it's true. But those who really smoke, they're the cool ones. I know people are going to hate me for this. Okay, so let's go on. But basically, it is a problem for people to fall into the trap just to be cool. Okay? But I will tell you, cool people smoke. Okay. Anyway, let's go on. So recognize the constant barrage of pressure society thrusts upon you, especially through advertising and media. It's just unbelievable what they call mainstream media has done, and how they are basically brainwashing. I mean, this is really going to come up, hopefully, a lot in the Senate and the Congress and whatever. There has to be, there's so much cancel culture. What they're doing to, if I'm allowed to mention, Dave Chappelle. He's quite a funny guy. I know it's quite crude, a lot of his language, but what happens in comedy is they basically tell you the truth, and it's so absurd it makes you laugh, right? There's so many absurdities to life, and what I think about him in terms of he stood up for the black community where nobody else did, and spoke in certain ways that, it's just true, unfortunately. And let me just say, there's a certain group of people, we're not going to mention who they are because they have too many letters to say, that the black community is actually quite jealous because look how far they came in such a short period of time. And the black community has been looking for, let's say, recognition, or getting out of the being oppressed, being considered second-class citizens. And they've come so far and have so much attention to them that he says, I don't hate them, I'm actually jealous of them. And he can anyway, that's where humor comes in. But unfortunately, there's this cancel culture. People are just brainwashed. Anyway, I think I went through enough of that part. Playing the role. Right? Another way for people to try to impress others is by assuming a role. or acting in a manner that they think other people will approve of them. But this
It's
is,
false.
again,
Yeah.
it's false. Now, we do need to figure out how to project positively, right? Fake it till you make it, right? I have a smile on my face. I truly am happy. But if I find myself getting down, I can make a smile. And there are enzymes in my body, right? There are things that will, chemicals that will produce a better outcome for myself. And that is something that I can try to do. There's nothing wrong with that, right? They say like you're going on a job interview, dress smart, dress sharp, right? But if you want to just get up in the morning and feel better about yourself, dress sharp. I mean, there is this idea, right? You have a power nap, you can have a power suit, right? There's nothing wrong with trying to bring out the best on the outside. In fact, we have a concept in Judaism, it's called toho kabaro. The truth is your inside should be like your outside, because you should be presenting yourself in the most positive way
As
outside.
you are, though. Yeah, you should actually be that way.
But so the inside needs to be. Now, we learn this in many ways, but the actual holy ark, I don't know if people understand what the ark is made of. We all think it's made of gold, which it is, inside and outside. But there's actually a wooden box in the middle. So I first of all, it didn't matter how heavy it is, because the people who raised it up were actually carried by the ark. So you might say, well, it doesn't matter. It could have been solid gold. But I think from a financial point of view, if it was solid gold, it would have been just outrageously expensive. But Hashem said to make a wooden box, and you have a outlying gold
Overlaying.
box,
Yeah, overlaying.
and an inside box that's gold as well, which was probably much thinner than the wood. So, okay, it was lighter. But anyway, so there's this idea. Why did we need three boxes? The inside is gold. The wooden box is basically the mainstay. And then you have the external box. So three boxes, actually three boxes, one inside the other. And that is that our insides are supposed to be like our outsides, not the other way around, right? Now, unfortunately, we fake it till you make it. That's fine, right? And I want to go into a lot of what that's all about. But basically, there's a story in the Gemara about two great Rosh Hashivas. One decided, they actually were like a tag team every other year, and they were the Rosh Hashivas, and one said, you know what, we're not going to take any more students who don't have the inner qualities, okay? Their insides are not like their outsides, and it was almost a disaster. And the next year, the other Rosh Hashiva said, no, we're going to accept everybody. And it said they added 400 more benches. Now, a bench is not 400 seats. I don't know how big the benches were, but let's say 4, 8, 10 more people on each bench. You're talking about it was the greatest thing to be able to teach people Torah who are not yet on the level.
Another, 1,500 students or more, yeah.
And that's what I want to talk about at the end. Let me just go through the last paragraph of the book, and then we'll go into this idea of doing things lishma, if you're doing things for the sake of heaven, or if you're there yet, because we're not all there. We have to start somewhere, okay? And we're going to see some of the ideas is even to entice somebody to do things not for the sake of heaven, that hopefully they will come to do it for the sake of heaven. So let's continue let me just finish the last paragraph, right? So basically, we all want to be great. Real honor comes from living like your soul wants you to and being true to yourself. Don't settle for ersatz. I never heard that word before, but I looked it up. ersatz. And it's basically, ersatz means being a usually artificial or inferior substitute. So synonyms are like artificial, bogus, dummy, factitious, fake, false, foul, F-A-U-X, imitation, imitative, man-made, mimic, mock, pretend, sham, simulated, substitute, synthetic. Where an antonym is like genuine, natural, and real. So he ends with this idea that don't settle for the fake version, that comes from external validation and recognition, as the Talmud says, and we already said in Erev in 13b, about honor flees from those who chase it, but it runs after those who flee from it. So what I wanted to do is, what did I say? 1 second. Oh. Give me 1 second.
Beautiful points. Yeah, beautiful points.
What did I want to show you? Sorry. Oh, here it is. I have it. So here we have like this idea. I mentioned in the very beginning of this series, there is a book called the Midrash Shmuel that is written specifically on this Mishnah. And it goes through the 48 ways as well, but a little bit more elaborate with a lot more source material. So he mentions about this particular idea, and now I have to find it. I'm on the wrong page. That this idea of distancing yourself from honor, meaning that a person doesn't learn Torah for the purpose of gaining the title of rabbi. I know, especially in the Christian world, the New Testament, what they call the New Testament, there's a lot of criticism about the Pharisees and rabbi, right? So it's true, this is an ancient Jewish teaching, right? That you don't learn Torah in order to be called a rabbi, to have a title, right? Because that is looking for honor. But rather one should learn only for the sake of love of God, which if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 20, which if you want to read.
Deuteronomy 30.
Verse 20.
Verse 20 reads, "To love the Lord your God, to listen to his voice, and to cleave to him, for that is your life and the length of your days, to dwell on the land which the Lord swore to your forefathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give to them."
So loving God, listening to God, and cleaving to God, that's the ultimate, right? Don't learn Torah in order to become a rabbi, right? Don't do it in order to have this great title, right? So there's a lot to say. I just want to mention in the beginning. I don't want to get too much into too much of the details. I want to move on. But I know that you're reading Nefesh HaChaim.
Yes.
There's a huge discussion, not just in Nefesh HaChaim, but also in Shari Tshuva. A lot of the books that we're discussing has this idea, what should you do? In other words, what should your, as a beginner, what should your motivation be? Because we have this idea of, even if you're not doing something for the right reason, you should do it anyway, which seems to contradict this idea that if you do it for the wrong reason, not only will you not get a reward, you might even be punished. So where does that fit in? Obviously, once you're growing, and you should be on a higher level, so if you're doing things for the wrong reason, then you will be punished, not only withheld the reward, but you'll be held accountable on your level. But if you're a beginner and you don't know anything about it, but you do understand that you will gain wisdom and you will gain some kind of prominence in the community, it doesn't mean that that's your sole motivation, but you are motivated, so there's nothing wrong with that according to many. I don't want to go into all the different opinions, but one thing the Nefesh Chaim mentions about when you start learning. So let me just.
I think it has to do with the prominence of doing over just or studying. You got to put it into practice at some point in time to integrate it into your person. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the beginning, you may not be there yet. And we already know that learning not for the right purpose is better than not learning at all. Okay, so how can that be a true statement if we already said that it's actually damaging? So there seems to be a contradiction between the Gemara and what the Rambam says, and it seems like what the Nefesh HaChaim, Reb Chaim Volozhiner, says, that a person should not be focusing on the feelings of devotion to God while learning Torah. It sounds crazy. And I thought it was absolutely meshuggah, absolutely crazy when I first heard it. But what he's actually saying is, if you want to intellectually get it, you have to devote your whole mind to the study of what you're trying to get. Okay, that's true while you're learning. But before you start, you can be interested in Devekas Hashem, in loving God, in tshuva. Think about tshuva. Think about repentance. Think about what you're going to get out of it. But once you're involved in the study, you shouldn't be thinking about that anymore. Only concentrate on the actual, I guess, details of what you're learning. I just wanted to mention that. Then I want to skip because it's really a complicated idea, and I don't want to get bogged down in it. So there's still a lot to talk about. I'll mention Gemara Pesachim. It teaches in Gemara Pesachim 50b, teaches that one who learns Torah shelo lishma, not for the sake of heaven, still gets a reward. So there's actually, interesting, I think I have two contradictory verses. Is this in here? I do have it's not verses, but they're Talmudic statements. I don't know why I didn't write it down, but I have it here. Everything's here in front of me. So maybe I will actually just read it from the beginning of this point. Okay, so the Gemara in Pesachim 50b teaches that one who learns Torah not for the sake of heaven receives reward up until the heavens. It's based on previous verses I can't find right now, but there's another verse that says that a person who learns Lishma for the sake of heaven, he receives reward above the heavens. So, in other words, it's not for naught that someone who's learning Torah may have ulterior motives. Get started, and you will receive reward, because hopefully that will turn into higher and altruistic reasons. So the Ri in the Tosfos explains that the shelo lishma, not for the sake of heaven, which is a mitzvah and for which a person is rewarded, refers to learning with no particular intention at all. This is the type of Torah study, shelo lishma. Again, this is for no reason. I'm sorry, shelo, right? Will bring a person to eventually for lishma. So hopefully that will bring the person to a higher level. And he also explains this is in contrast to a person who learns in order to lord over others. Regarding such a person, the Gemara actually says, anyone who engages in Torah shelo lishma, not for the sake of heaven, it would have been better if he had never been born. So you have to understand where you're at on your journey. In the beginning, that would be not such a bad thing if you're trying to, again, what does it mean? Gain prominence or seeking honor of some sort. But once you're on that path, hopefully your character will start to develop and you'll mature.
So let the Torah nourish what it's intended to nourish, but don't distort it.
Right. Rabbi Dessler in Strive for Truth explains this idea to mean that even if the Jewish people forsake God and they only study Torah as a satisfying intellectual pursuit, the light of Torah will eventually restore them to Hashem. In other words, that's why one should learn Torah, even if they're not learning for the right reasons. The Torah itself is so powerful and hopefully will turn you around. Again, there's a lot of discussion about how this idea of studying in order to become a rabbi, to be called a rabbi, is problematic. The comment here suggests the distinction in Rashi's view between learning in order to be called a rabbi, which brings death to a person, and learning for honor, which brings reward to a person, is as follows. So the one who learns for the sake of being called rabbi may start to believe he's qualified to instruct others in the ideals of Torah. This can actually be harmful to his students, who will receive the message that it is ideal to use the Torah to enhance one's own ego. This is in contrast with the person who studies to receive honor. He never adopts the attitude he's worthy of conveying Torah ideals to others, and he can therefore use honor as a motivational tool when he starting out. So this is really what I wanted to mention. Now, there is one more small piece, and that is that a Torah scholar, a true Torah scholar, so he knows that when he walks into a room, everyone stands up. There's nothing you can do. You're walking into the room. But if you see in the distance a lot of people sitting and they honor you, you can walk a different way and create a situation where they wouldn't stand up for you. So I'll just read what he says. The Tana is also suggesting when this Torah scholar sees people sitting along the path which he intends to walk, he instead takes a roundabout route so as not to cause those sitting to stand up before him and honor him. He does this because he keeps himself far away from honor. This person will merit Torah. Now, we talked about the 48 ways in order to acquire Torah. It doesn't mean that he will have a clearer path to acquiring Torah. It means that he will actually receive Torah. Metaphysically, by running away from honor, the Torah will just become infused in him. It's just like an amazing idea. I'm not saying he doesn't have to work for it, but I guess the actual effort he made by not causing
there's honor all the way up to the top. Yeah,
he'll receive even more Torah because the Torah is the honor itself, which is an amazing idea. Don't forget. By the way, where do we know that you're supposed to stand up for a Torah scholar? What are you supposed to do? It's one of the 613 commandments. Look in Leviticus 19:32. We need teachers. You can't, you know what I'm saying? Like we said from the very beginning, if someone else can do the job, then let them do it. When there aren't teachers, be a man, right? When there's no man, be a man. If there's no teachers and you have the gift of speaking or learning or both, then you should figure out how to go about doing it. So read for us Leviticus 19:32.
It says, "You shall rise before a venerable person, and you shall respect the elderly, and you shall fear your God. I am the Lord."
Now, the very fact that the second part of the verse mentions, "and you shall respect the elderly," go back to the original part. You shall rise before a venerable person. That's how it's translated anyway. Seva takum, literally, I mean, we do translate that as the elderly. But then the next statement is zaken, someone who's elderly. So which one is it? So the seva, for the seva, it really means like white hair. So we say that the wisdom turns your hair white. But anyway, you cannot say it means the same thing. We know what it means. And it's saying that for someone who is wise. That's why we stand up for the elderly, because they're wise, not just because they're elderly. There's another verse that says, for the elderly, you stand up. Okay? So for the wise, you have to, we recognize the value, right? Why else would you be standing up? It's honor. So we have the obligation to honor those. And rabbi just means teacher. So what are you supposed to do if you have it? You have to give it away. And that's what I believe every Jew really should be, a teacher, because we all have the mitzvah to learn, one of the 613 commandments, and to learn is derived from the verse, you shall teach. You shall teach, as Rav Noach Weinberg always said, you should learn in order to teach. Doesn't mean you actually will teach, but at least learn in order to teach.
In order,
or to give it away. And if you have the ability to give it away, you better damn do it, right? You better find the opportunities to give it away in a clear, concise fashion with good character. And
may I ask, Rabbi, a question?
Yes.
In Yibbenei, do you guys stand with Rabbi Breitowitz? Like if he enters a room, do people stand?
Yes, of course, yes.
I thought so. Yeah. For sure. Beautiful.
Yeah, anybody who's respected as a rabbi was coming from the people, not from him. He will not. In fact, he'll usually, if people stand up, he'll quickly try to sit down himself or tell others to sit down. It's out of humility. I mean, look, you have secular leaders. I think of the president of the United States walks into a room. I think.
Yeah, the Queen of England and whatnot.
People stand up. It's what they call protocol, or the Queen. I think she walks. I think the same thing. I could be wrong, but there are certain things, and they could be not very smart, but because of their honor, you do it. Here, we're doing it because of the wisdom that they have. Okay.
Well done. Yeah, well done for sure. Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. Well, is that it for today, Rabbi? It's just a beautiful series.
Yeah, that'll be it for now.
So distance oneself from honor and understand all the reason behind it just makes all the difference. But don't ever be afraid to study and learn and to be bold out there. Hashem will straighten you out if you're approaching out of love for him and trying to cleave to him, I think, is a general overview. We hope you're all encouraged. I love this series. It only gets better and better as we keep going up to number 48. So Hashem willing, Rabbi, is your schedule permit number 37 next week?
So far, so good. Yes, looking forward.
All right. So Hashem willing, we'll be back next week, same time, with number 37 of the 48 Ways to Wisdom. And we wish you all have a wonderful, wonderful week.